Coming up, it's day 3 on the Majestic Princess and it's our second country, Turkey. So come with me as I take a private tour to the ancient city of Ephesus and also spend time exploring the resort town of Kusadasi. Good morning from Kusadasi. It looks like it's going to be a really beautiful day here, and as far as I can tell we seem to be docked very close to what I think is the town centre. So I think there are a large number of ships that are due in port today, but so far we only seem to have one neighbour just over there, and that's the luxury Silver Seas ship, the Silver Muse. Disembarking the ship was straightforward and there was a reasonably short walk to the cruise terminal building. So today I'm taking a small group tour to the ancient city of Ephesus, and that also includes a visit to the House of the Virgin Mary. I've arranged this through Get Your Guide, and the meeting arrangements indicated that my guide will be waiting for me outside the door of the terminal building. That may sound easy enough, but believe me, once I exited the terminal building, the area was really chaotic. There were a multitude of tour guides all waiting to greet their guests, as well as others who were also there trying to sell their tours. When visiting Kusadasi, one of the most popular shore excursions is to visit the ancient city of Ephesus. Now, I could have chosen to do this on a standard size shore excursion through the cruise line and would, with that, have the pleasure of sitting on a coach with about 45 other people, and that would have cost me almost $150 US. I opted instead for a privately arranged small group tour, which, as it actually turns out, was incredibly small because there was just myself and one other guest, also from the Majestic Princess. It was a 5-hour tour, and that provided the service of the tour guide and also transport, as well as admission to the various facilities. This cost me a total of just under €80, or approximately 92 US dollars, or about 70 British pounds. Now, once I had located the tour guide, she led myself and the other guest to a waiting 6-seater Mercedes minivan, and we set off.
Kuşadası is a resort town, is a small resort town. We have 1,500,000 population in winter times, but in summer times with holiday makers, with visitors, with seasonal workers, almost 500,000 population in summer seasons.
Other than being aware that Kusadasi, or well, actually she pronounced it as Kusadasi, is a resort, I really had no idea what it might actually look like. So I was actually pleasantly surprised as we drove along the seafront. Now, after a short time, we were then driving into the Turkish countryside and we headed up into the hills. Ephesus is about 40 kilometers outside of Kusadasi, and the tour guide en route decided that timing-wise it was actually better for us to visit the House of the Virgin Mary first. She pointed out as we passed one of the entry points to Ephesus how busy it actually was at that stage, and she definitely proved to be right on that front later on. The House of the Virgin Mary is about 5 kilometers from Ephesus, and it's reputed to be the final home of the Virgin Mary. It's been a pilgrimage site since the late 19th century, although its authenticity has not actually ever been confirmed. Entry to the complex was included in the overall tour cost. However, if you were to travel here separately and pay at the entry point, it would cost 500 Turkish lira. So I think that's the equivalent of about €10.50. Now, incidentally, on the subject of currency, it may be useful to know, despite the fact that it's not actually part of the European Union, the euro currency is pretty widely accepted, particularly around the resort area of Kusadasi. So once we arrived at the complex at the House of the Virgin Mary, from the parking area there's an avenue which leads to the house. On either side of this pedestrianised area there are several souvenir shops. They're mostly selling religious goods and relics and that kind of thing. There's also a cafe there. Now, it was still pretty early in the morning by the time that we arrived at the site, so the queue to enter the house itself wasn't particularly long, but I did notice that a little bit later on it seemed to be growing quite a bit. Now, the time available to spend within the house is limited. It is a very modest house. It's literally just a case of walk in through the front door and out on a rear door. There is no photography or videos allowed in the house itself. And then once you exit and go down onto lower ground, there are 3 holy water fountains. There's also quite an unusual wishing wall, and basically our guide explained that people bring along their wishes written on paper and they pin them to the wall. As we made the return journey downhill to the entry point to the ancient city of Ephesus, it was obvious our tour guide had made the right call. The crowds that we had seen on the way past previously had all dispersed at this stage. If admission is not included as part of your tour, you can actually purchase the admission ticket at the entry kiosk, but you should be aware in this instance the euro currency isn't actually accepted, so you need either Turkish cash or also debit and credit cards are accepted. In the case of my tour, the admission was included as part of the overall cost that I had paid. So just to give you a breakdown of the tour cost, essentially €17 was for transport. And that was to and from Ephesus and to the House of the Virgin Mary. The other €60 covered the admission fees to both of those sites and also the services of the tour guide. Obviously, gratuities are extra and discretionary. Ephesus dates from the 10th century BC, and at one point it was one of the largest cities in the ancient medieval world. Archaeological excavations have been ongoing at this extensive site for decades, and it's actually one of the largest Roman archaeological sites in the world. According to our tour guide, at this point it's estimated that only about 20% of the ruins have actually been discovered, so this is going to be an amazing and interesting site to visit for years to come. The tour guide had an amazing knowledge of the site. Now, interestingly, she actually explained that she has a university degree in tour guiding. Never realised there was such a thing. In order to provide tours in various areas of Turkey, she had to take further exams and be certified. Now, the benefit of a small group tour was very evident as we explored this extensive site. While the large tour groups were being shepherded around at speed through the site, jostling for position in order to hear what their guide had to say. In my case, with just 2 people on this small group tour, the guide was entirely at our disposal to ask any questions that we wished, and she provided huge amounts of information. Now, the other person on the tour was elderly, and at times he was actually finding the heat and the extent of walking quite tiring, so the guide was quite happy to facilitate frequent rest breaks to accommodate him. However, if you are considering a visit to Ephesus, that does bring up a few practical points that you should really be aware of. It will most likely be very hot, as it was today for my visit. There is little or no shade, and there are very few opportunities to sit. Tour excursion descriptions quite rightly advise that a visit to Ephesus requires walking long distances over uneven surfaces. And I would say it's also important to be aware that the nature of those surfaces, as well as them being uneven, they're incredibly slippy, even on a dry day like this. Now, in the course of my time walking around the complex, I actually saw numerous instances where people actually slipped and fell. None seemed to be serious, but nonetheless an unpleasant experience. Now, towards the end of the route around the site, there was an opportunity to experience a multimedia display in the visitor centre, or to give it its official title, the Ephesus Experience Museum. Now, I don't have any footage of this, but essentially it's a fairly new facility. I believe it was opened in 2023, and it's an audiovisual experience which, using massive wraparound screens, it actually simulates historical scenes from centuries ago when Ephesus would have actually been a thriving city. After leaving Ephesus, there was a quick stop at another archaeological site, the Temple of Artemis, and after that the guide offered various suggestions as to how we might like to conclude the tour. One option was lunch at a venue that she recommended. That wasn't included in the tour price, incidentally. Alternatively, she was quite keen to promote the idea of a visit to a carpet weaving enterprise, or alternatively a fashion outlet specialising in leather goods. Now, both myself and the other tour guest politely declined all of these options, and we expressed a preference to return to Kusadasi. While the other person wished to return to the ship in order to rest, my motivation was to return in order to have enough time to explore around this resort town. I spent a few pleasant hours for the remainder of the afternoon enjoying a walk along the extensive promenade and finding that Kusadasi sign for the all-important photo opportunity, and I also wandered amongst the myriad of retail offerings. Now, on the point of retail, another practical tip here. Retailers in Turkey are pretty aggressive in their efforts to make a sale, so even a casual glance at goods on display when passing a shop will probably result in the retailer pretty much invading your personal space in an effort to encourage you to come and browse and buy. They really don't seem to have very many boundaries in that regard. So if you don't intend to purchase, be prepared to firmly say no and keep walking. Now, in addition to a multitude of the usual type of souvenir shops that you would expect to find in any beach resort, there was also quite an amount of so-called designer goods, particularly designer handbags, and at astoundingly inexpensive costs. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to find that some stores actually had the decency to be upfront and advertise their wares as fake designer goods. Even if you don't feel comfortable venturing too far around the town area, immediately adjacent to the cruise port you can find a reasonably pleasant environment in order to experience it. It has an extensive shopping arcade, and just in case Turkish coffee isn't your thing and you're longing for something more familiar, there's also a Starbucks in this complex. Later, heading back to the ship, there was a little bit of a queue to get through security, and immediately on exiting security, the route to the ship took you via a large duty-free store. On exiting that and going onto the dock, it was time for some ship spotting. While we had 2 ships when I departed in the morning, one being obviously my ship, the Majestic Princess, and the other being the Silver Muse, we had now become 4 ships in port. We were joined by the Norwegian Pearl, and also a ship called Gemini, which is part of the Princess Cruises group, with a bit of Googling telling me that that's actually a Turkish cruise line. So that was why there appeared to be passengers embarking on that ship today. Sail away was at 6 p.m. and the captain came over the PA system in advance, advising of windy weather conditions which he expected to make it difficult departing from the dock. That may explain why a little later on at the traditional captain's welcome and the champagne waterfall, which is generally a regular feature of Princess Cruises' formal night, the captain wasn't actually there at the champagne waterfall, at least not at the start. This whole formal night ceremony to me actually felt pretty disjointed in comparison to what I've usually experienced on Princess Cruises. Typically what occurs on a first formal night on a Princess Cruise, the champagne waterfall will be set up, the captain and all of the senior officers will all come into the piazza, and the captain will then give his welcome toast. He will welcome everyone on board. He will generally give a rundown of the number of passengers on board and the various different nationalities that they are actually from.
Are you ready? Hands up, are you ready? Then here we go, we're going to count it down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In this case, the champagne waterfall occurred. The cruise director did a simple countdown, and probably about half an hour later, it was only at that point that the senior staff and the captain appeared very, very briefly. He made the briefest of welcomes. There was no mention of numbers of passengers or nationalities or any of the usual stuff. So if you are a regular cruiser to Princess, let me know if you've experienced that kind of disjointed setup or if it's generally the more traditional one. Added to that, I also have the sense that there are quite a lot of guests on board who are cruising with Princess for the first time and possibly may even be on their overall first cruise. And honestly, they haven't quite got the memo about formal nights. Now, while I am by no means the fashion police, I do think it is unacceptable to roll up to the champagne waterfall to have your photo taken with either the captain or whatever other senior officer is there, while you're still in your wrinkled shorts and t-shirt that you've been roaming around the port all day in. Now, in saying that, I don't want to leave any intending first-time cruisers who may be watching this with the impression that you have to go into complete overdrive with ball gowns and tuxedos in order to experience Princess Formal Night. Dress code over the years has become increasingly relaxed, but really, if you're intending to enjoy any of the main dining venues, certainly if you're intending to have your photo taken at the Champagne Waterfall, do be prepared to dress a little bit nicer, a little bit more appropriate for that more elevated evening experience.
On every single day. He's all the way from Italy as well. Please put your hands together for your captain, Captain Giuseppe Castellano.
Buonasera signore e signori, good evening ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on board the beautiful Majestic Princess. On behalf of Princess Cruises and their ship's company, it's our privilege tonight to extend our gratitude to sailing on this love boat, because we are a love boat here. So the Majestic Princess is a beautiful ship with fantastic crew, and of course together with my senior officer we will make sure that you will have a wonderful vacation on board the Majestic Princess. So far we've been in two beautiful ports, Mykonos and today in Kusadasi. Windy day yesterday and today. Mother Nature is playing a little bit of a trick with us, but so far we are doing great. Thank you so far.
After seeing the captain's briefest of welcomes, it was time to head to the theatre for the first of the production shows on this cruise. It was called Fira, and it's set in a turn-of-the-century fairground. It's generally a love story, and weaved in throughout the performance there are plenty of recognisable songs, hence the reason that no recording was allowed. It was my first time actually seeing this particular production show on Princess, and I really enjoyed it, and I felt it was of a really good standard. My dining choice for the evening was in one of the specialty restaurants. This time it was the Crown Grill, which is the steakhouse on board. Now the footage that you're seeing here is from boarding day, when it wasn't actually open, because it was far too busy this evening to actually record. It's a really nice setting, and the food, as always in the Crown Grill, was very good. However, it was strike three in terms of the service. While my waiter was very pleasant when he did actually attend to, it seemed to be a case similar to the two previous evenings in, firstly, the Italian restaurant and then in the main dining room last night, where there generally seems to be a shortage of waitstaff. There was a significant wait between courses, despite the fact that I was in the restaurant towards the latter end of the evening when it was gradually growing less busy. As always, there was plenty of music all around the ship, and as I passed the piazza a little bit later, it was fun to watch all the people on the dance floor, definitely enjoying the ABBA dance party that was going on. For me, I had a more sedate end to the night. I headed to the pool deck to watch a movie under the stars. Coming up in the next episode, I will be visiting port number 3, and that will be Rhodes, which is another one of the Greek islands on this itinerary. So I hope you'll join me for that, and if you would like to stay up to date on when that vlog is coming out, please do consider hitting the subscribe button so that you'll be notified. It would also be great if you enjoyed this or found it useful if you would consider hitting the like button. It really does mean such a lot to a really small channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.